Welcome back to Fantasy Files 1054 or FFX54 for short. We're coming here with a Week 5 wide receiver ranking video. We put up our first weekly running back ranking video Tuesday. Yesterday was my birthday, and then today we're doing our first wide receiver ranking video. And then we're going to do these continuing throughout the entirety of the season. I think this is the most helpful way to give you guys information to hopefully put yourself in a position to win your fantasy football league. So what we're going to do is the 2 ranking videos during the week, and then we'll do a live stream before all the games on Sunday. Now, if you think about October, we have London games for the next 2 weeks, so we'll be doing those streams at around 8 or 8:30, and then moving forward from that, we're going to do streams at around 11:30 or 12. So you can look out for that, but best way to be available for that is to like the video, subscribe, and then ring the notification bell so you get notified when we're live. Then we can get all of our lineups locked in based on all of the injury news on Sunday morning. So without further ado, we're going to get right into this. I'm trying to get these videos to be a little bit shorter so you guys can get the information in a more compact manner. So let's just get right into it. Starting our rankings with, we're going to do the wide receiver rank. First of all, we're going to do the wide receiver ranking videos very similarly to how we did the running back ranking videos. Pretty much identical, which means we're going to do the top 12. Then after that, we'll do another 12, and then we'll do the final 12 at the end for a total of 36 wide receivers ranked. And then anything after that, you're kind of getting more into the waiver wire or unstartable wide receivers. So hopefully this will give you some information to know who you want to start this week at the wide receiver position. So to kick it off, we are going to get right into our first top 12. And there they are. First couple should come to no surprise. Cooper Kupp. I don't care that the matchup is difficult. Dallas has only let up, or they haven't let up over 20 points yet this season. So their defense is really good, but it's Cooper Kupp. He's getting hyper targeted because they really have no other receiving options in Los Angeles. So easy enough. Cooper Kupp, number 1. Justin Jefferson, number 2. Again, nothing to be said here. It's Jay Jetta, baby. We leave him in. Jamar Chase, I put over Stefan Biggs this week because of the matchup alone. The past 2 times, or the 2 times that the Ravens and the Bengals met last year, there were over 41 points scored per game by Cincinnati. Now, it was a decimated Baltimore Ravens defense, specifically their secondary. But nonetheless, we saw them let up multiple big games to fantasy wide receivers this year, even with our healthy secondary. See Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in week 3, I think it was. So, or was it week 2? Either way, the matchup is still really good for Jamar Chase here, and he's going to be our number 3. Right behind him, we have Stefan Biggs against Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh, I think this is going to be a blowout game, so that really doesn't bode well for Stefan Diggs' fantasy performance and fantasy opportunity. I think they're going to go up quick and then run the clock out, so that's why we have him knocked down 1 spot behind Jamar Chase. After Stefan Diggs, we have Tyreek Hill. The reason I bumped Tyreek Hill above players like Devonte Adams and Mike Evans and A.J. Brown is because of Teddy Bridgewater. When Tua got injured last week, we saw Teddy Bridgewater come in and hyper-target Tyreek Hill. And I think that Teddy Bridgewater's role in this offense while Tua is gone is going to be just getting the ball in Tyreek Hill's hands and letting him be a yak monster, standing for yards after catch. So I think that it'll be more of that moving forward, just having Teddy Bridgewater get it into the playmakers' hands and letting them do most of the work. And we'll see how I think this affects Jalen Waddle moving forward. You don't see him on the top 12, and I think it's going to stay that way until Tua gets back. So moving on, we have Devonte Adams after Tyreek Hill at number 6 against Kansas City. Is going to be a divisional high-scoring matchup. I think it's going to be very close, and I think that they're going to turn to the stars, them being Derek Carr and Patrick Mahomes are going to turn to their stars in this tough matchup and just feed the beast. So I think Devonte Adams has a big game here against Kansas City. And mind you, Kansas City has a bottom 10 defense when it comes to wide receiver points scored against in fantasy football PPR formats. at allowing just shy of 40 points per game to the wide receiver position. So this should bode well for Devonte Adams this week. Number 7, we have Cd-Lam. Now you see that asterisk next to it because right before I was about to start shooting this video, I got a notification on my phone from Fantasy Pros app telling me that Cd-Lam missed practice today with a groin injury, and he's questionable. So that's why you see that asterisk. I think Cd-Lam does very well in this game, being that the Los Angeles Rams are going to be the second worst, just right behind the Ravens, the second worst defenses when it comes to fantasy points scored at the wide receiver position. And they're allowing 48 points per game to the wide receivers against their defense. So I love the matchup if Cd-Lam plays. Now, if Cd-Lam doesn't play, we're looking at Michael Gallup potentially being a smash play. So I hope you picked him up on the waiver wires. I know I've been stashing him since the draft, and if you guys watch any of the Underdog Fantasy videos from the offseason when we were making those rest of season best ball drafts, I was drafting the hell out of Michael Gallup because he's going to be the number 2 option and in a what should be a good offense when Dak Prescott comes back, and honestly with Cooper Rush too. And if Cd-Lam isn't there, Michael Gallup should step into that role. So stay tuned for that if you're a Cd-Lam owner. But if Cd-Lam does play, I really like him in this matchup. But mind you, I don't know much about this injury so far. So if it's not a big deal, then we're going to keep him here. If it is something that's going to bother him, even if he does play, he might get bumped down out of the top 12. And maybe Michael Gallup would probably be in the, let's just say 16 to 20 range, maybe in the next category of people if Cd-Lam is out. But this list is assuming that Cd-Lam plays, and we have him at number 7. Right behind Cd-Lam, we have Mike Evans versus Atlanta. Atlanta has one of the worst passing defenses in the league, and I don't think that the Buccaneers take the foot off the gas, even if they go up early. I think they're going to pad Tom Brady's stats as much as possible, and we've seen them do this in the past. Even when they're up, they just pile on the points. So I'm not worried about the matchup at all with Mike Evans, because a lot of times if the matchup is really bad and they go up fast, the wide receivers don't see a whole lot of volume, but I don't think that'll be the case with Tom Brady at quarterback. So Mike Evans, coming off of a 30-plus point week, we're going to have him at number 8. Right behind him, we have A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown and the Eagles have just been absolute studs this year, going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Arizona Cardinals actually have one of the better pass defenses in the league, only allowing 30.2 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. But I do think this is a competitive matchup, and when we have a stud like these guys in the top 12, I think that this is going to be a decently close game, and I think A.J. Brown gets fed. Right behind him, we have Debo Samuel with a pretty much whatever matchup. Carolina Panthers are right in the middle of the pack, so I don't think that plays a whole big factor into our ranking, but we saw him go off last week, Monday night, and I think that we see more of the same. I think you're going to get around 15 to 25 points out of Debo Samuel. And, you know, he's the highlight of this offense, especially while Elijah Mitchell's out. So we're going to have Debo Samuel at number 10. Right behind Debo Samuel, we're going to have T. Higgins. And again, this is the same reason we have Jamar Chase above Stefan Biggs at number 3 this week. T. Higgins is benefiting from the same matchup against Baltimore. The Baltimore Ravens are allowing 49.7 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. So this is something that you want any piece of that you can get. And to be honest with you, even if the matchup was like a middle-of-the-pack matchup, this is a divisional game with high-powered offenses, and it very easily could be a shootout on the offensive side of the ball. So either way, I think this is a game that you want a part of the passing game on either side of the ball. So we're going to have T. Higgins at number 11. Right behind him, we have Mike Williams against the Cleveland Browns. I think this will actually be a closer matchup than it should be, to be honest with you. I think the Chargers' defense isn't as strong as it once was. It's kind of been riddled with injuries. And we know that Keenan Allen is either going to be out of this game or he is going to be on a snap count, most likely. He's still nursing that hamstring. Right now, they're recording this video, which is 4:40 on October 6th, Thursday. It looks like Keenan Allen is day-to-day. So, like I said, it being so late in the week, even if he does play, I think this is a good play for Mike Williams. But I will say that I think this is the last week that Mike Williams has that wide receiver 1 alpha productive fantasy football he puts out those high points. Not for the rest of the season, but I think it's the last week we can count on it on a regular basis, because ever since Keenan Allen went out for the past 3 weeks, he's been a very easily startable player. He's dropped, I think, 25, 9, and 16. So he's been very reliable, but that's largely because of Keenan Allen not being there. And even if Keenan Allen is there this week, I think you still get a lot of volume towards Mike Williams. So take advantage of Mike Williams this week and take advantage of Keenan Allen still coming back from that hamstring injury. But if he has a really good week this week, you look to sell him as high as possible and replace him with someone that will continue to produce for you for the rest of the season. Moving on to the next 12 players, 13 through 24. We're going to have Marquis Brown kicking it off. We have Marquis Brown against a difficult matchup in the Philadelphia Eagles. Actually, it's looking like they're a middle-of-the-pack defense against fantasy wide receivers. 32.8 fantasy points allowed per game to the wide receiver position. But we know the Philadelphia Eagles are a very good defense. We saw it last week. So that all being said, we also know that the Arizona Cardinals want to run as many plays as possible on the offensive side of the ball. And if you look at the targets that Marquis Brown has been getting in the past few weeks, it's disgusting. It's well over 10 every single week. DeAndre Hopkins is still out for this week and next, and then he'll be back. So get what you can out of Marquis Brown, and then maybe next week you look to sell him. But for this week, Marquis Brown is going to be a smash play. Right behind Marquis Brown, we have Cortland Sutton versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Indianapolis Colts have the fourth best defense as opposed to or against wide receivers, allowing 25.5 fantasy points per game to that position. But Cortland Sutton, again, he's been averaging around 10 or 11 targets per game. He's been very efficient. He hasn't disappointed a single week this week, and we're not going to start counting him out now, especially with the Devonte Williams injury of last week, tearing his ACL and LCL. Melvin Gordon will be the running back in that offense, but it's not their first option, so they might lean on the passing game a little bit more than they are used to as a little bit of a crutch. And Cortland Sutton would be a direct beneficiary of that. So you got to remember that Devonte Williams was the receiving back in this backfield. So any of those targets that were going Devonte Williams' way, they might get sprinkled across the offense. So I think Cortland Sutton is in a good position to succeed tonight on Amazon Prime. Tune in. Right behind Cortland Sutton, we have Christian Kirk in a delicious matchup against the Houston Texans. Horrible defense. They have not done too bad as a passing defensive unit, though, is what it's looking like. 30.8 fantasy points per game. The argument you can make against Christian Kirk this week and why we have him down here at 15 is because regardless of the volume he has been getting, I think it's a game script that is really good for James Robinson and the running backs of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they take a commanding lead and hold it for the entirety of the game. But for those first two quarters, I think Christian Kirk gets peppered. I think he has his opportunities at a touchdown, and that's why we're going to have him up here at number 15. Right behind Christian Kirk, you're going to finally see Jalen Waddle. I think his talent can position him way above where we have him ranked. But like I said when I was talking about Tyreek Hill, I don't think that Teddy Bridgewater has the same rapport with Jalen Waddle that Tua did. You got to remember that Tua and Jalen Waddle, they were a lethal combination in college. So their chemistry was immaculate coming in to the Dolphins locker room, and that's why you see all those targets going his way. But I think that gets scaled back a little bit with Teddy Bridgewater, and I think he's going to lean on Tyreek Hill more. I don't think that Jalen Waddle is a bad play this week, but I think you have to temper your expectations. And I will say for Jalen Waddle, this is going to be our first trade target of the video because I think regardless of how gruesome that injury was to Tua, I think that he comes back this year. And when he comes back, he's going to return to his top 10 form. So if you can go to the Jalen Waddle owner and convince them that, Tua was the only reason he was succeeding and might as well sell him to me for cheap before you get caught holding the bag, then that might be a sale you can make so that when he does, especially if you're like a 3-1 or 4-0 team and you can weather that weight, maybe that's something you can capitalize on in the next couple weeks when Tua comes back. But as for now, we have him at 16 versus the New York Jets. Right behind him, we have Michael Pittman Jr. tonight at Denver. One thing you have to remember in this ranking is that the Denver Broncos are the third best defense led by Patrick Surtain, opposed to or against. I don't know why I can't figure out how to say that. Against fantasy wide receivers, I guess, only allowing 24.4 fantasy points per game to that position. And the other thing that is really concerning to me is that Alec Pierce is actually on the come up. He actually out targeted Michael Pittman last week. He out fantasy performed him last week, and he is a rookie, so he's going to continue to get better and better and more touches and more touches. So I did just buy Michael Pittman at a low in one of my leagues, but I'm a little bit nervous about it. I don't want to go out there and hit the trade target button and tell you guys to trade low for Michael Pittman, because I do think his ceiling is a top 12 receiver for the rest of the season. But right now, to give up the amount of capital you would have to get him, even at a low point, I'm not confident that it's going to pay you back, because I'm not confident in the Colts. I'm not confident in Matt Ryan. And we have Alec Pierce coming up. So all those things combined, I have to have him down here at number 17. Right behind Michael Pittman Jr., we have Chris Godwin, finally back. Got 10 targets last week versus Atlanta. A bad team. I think that he just gets hyper-targeted again, because I think Mike Evans will be that big play and red zone target, and then I think Chris Godwin is going to be everything else pretty much. So Chris Godwin is honestly, we can hit the trade target button for Chris Godwin as well, because he is going to, he hasn't done anything all year pretty much. And even last week, I think he underperformed for the amount of targets he got. So if you could trade for him before this week starts, do it. I think it can be a move that will pay you off for the rest of the season. So right after Chris Godwin, we have Chris Olave. We still have some injuries peppered in all over the New Orleans Saints offense. I don't know the status of Alvin Kamara. I don't know the status of Michael Thomas. And that's something we're going to want to keep our eyes on. But regardless of all of that, as long as Jameis Winston is there, we're going to want to play Chris Olave, and we're going to rank him in this middle of the second tier. So Chris Olave versus Seattle. Let's see. Seattle is actually not too bad. It's a top 10 defense against fantasy wide receivers. But regardless, this game's going to be a shootout. And if Jameis Winston is there, Chris Olave is going to eat. So moving on is Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin took a big jump in rankings this week after the Jahan Dotson news. If you don't know, Jahan Dotson is going to miss time with an injury. I'm not too sure what the injury is, but regardless, the issue with Terry McLaurin was that the targets were spread too thin between Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and Jahan Dotson. Now with one of those players out of the picture, I think Terry McLaurin steps back up into that wide receiver 2 range and, gives you a good fantasy performance and something you can count on. So Terry McLaurin, number 20 overall. Number 21, Drake London. I wish I could put him higher than this, and I'm a Kyle Pitts owner in multiple leagues, so this might be an emotional reaction to the 7 completions we saw all game last week with Marcus Mariota. 7 completions in the entire game. And, if the pie's going to be that small, even if you get 100% of the targets at 7 completions, that's not a wide receiver 1. So I love Drake London as a prospect. I don't like his quarterback, and I'm not too confident that his quarterback can get the ball to him. I know we saw it in the first few weeks, which is why we still have him in this wide receiver 2 range. I think he should bounce back against the Tampa Bay Bucs, even though it's a very good defense. It's going to be a game script that allows them to pass, because one thing we have to at least acknowledge about last week is they won the game, and it's because they went up and they ran the clock out. Very boring win. Very unfortunate win if you're a Drake London and Kyle Pitts owner in fantasy, but that's kind of a silver lining going into this week, is I don't think that game script, I know that game script's not going to be the same, and they're going to have to pass the ball a lot more versus Tampa Bay Bucs. So we have Drake London at 21. 22 and 23 is a little tricky. We have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf back-to-back. This is against New Orleans Saints. I think that Marshawn Lattimore shadows DK Metcalf this entire game. And honestly, we've been seeing all of the volume going, not all the volume. It's been pretty 50-50 between DK and Tyler Lockett. But the majority of the volume is going to Tyler Lockett. And I would rather fish the volume, especially if Lattimore is going to be against DK Metcalf. So for those reasons, I put Tyler Lockett slightly above DK Metcalf. But either way, I think it's kind of a shot in the dark, and you're going to see him in this lower wide receiver 2 range for this week against the New Orleans Saints. Right after the Seattle Seahawks receivers, we have Amari Cooper as our last wide receiver 2. Going up against the LA Chargers. Now, this matchup is a decent matchup. LA Chargers are kind of the bottom of the pack as opposed or against wide receivers in fantasy football. And Amari Cooper had a little bit slower of a week last week, but I think he'll bounce back here. He'll give the Chargers a little run for their money. I think the Browns will give Chargers a little bit of a run for their money. And I think Amari Cooper is going to have some fantasy payoff because of that. So Amari Cooper, number 24. Moving on to our last group, wide receiver 3s. Kicking it off, we're going to have Brandon Cooks versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars are kind of a whatever matchup, kind of upper middle pack, allowing 32.4 fantasy points per game on a weekly basis. But Brandon Cooks gets all the volume in the passing game from Davis Mills. So based off of pretty much volume alone and the skill that Brandon Cooks possesses, we're going to have him at 25. He's a reliable option to throw into your lineup, but not too much to talk about here. So moving on, Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel, kind of plug and play what I said about Terry McLaurin. We have more of a pie to distribute to Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin with Jahan Dotson out. I think that Curtis Samuel is slightly less talented with a slightly higher volume share in this offense, which is why I have him lower than Terry McLaurin. I think that Terry McLaurin has the big play potential that Curtis Samuel doesn't. But either way, Curtis Samuel is going to get the volume. And if you get the ball in his hands in a PPR league, that's going to put Curtis Samuel at the 26 overall position. Moving on to 27, this might be very surprising. And I was honestly surprised to see those bigger websites not ranking Josh Reynolds higher. Amon-Ra St. Brown is officially out. DeAndre Swift is officially out. This is why we saw TJ Hawkinson go for 39.9 fantasy points last week, and Josh Reynolds go for a decent box score as well. I don't know the exact fantasy points, but the past 2 weeks that Amon-Ra has been dealing with injuries and DeAndre Swift has been dealing with injuries, he's been putting up like 15 to 20 point games because he's basically the only wide receiver other than DJ Chark here. So I think DJ Chark is going to make it back for this game. But either way, Josh Reynolds is going to play that Amon-Ra St. Brown role. And in this offense, with Jared Goff getting all the time he needs with probably the best offensive line in the league on the Detroit Lions, I think Josh Reynolds is in a great spot to succeed this week at number 27. So might even be a waiver wire pickup. I know in my league, he's on the waivers, and I might even pick him up and start him over. I don't know who I would start him over on my teams, but regardless, Josh Reynolds is a very good option and probably the best waiver wire pickup option late in the week that you could get. Moving on from Josh Reynolds, we have the Green Bay Packer wide receivers in the same format as the Seattle Seahawks, with Romeo Doubs at 28 and Allen Lazard at 29, going up against the best defense going up against fantasy wide receivers at allowing only 23.6 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. Now, this isn't to a single player. This is to the entire wide receiver core. The New York Giants are only allowing 23.6 fantasy points per week. So that's a bit concerning. That being said, the Giants have had an easier schedule in the beginning of the year other than last week. And I think Aaron Rodgers does find success. So I think he puts up well over 23.6 points as a whole, as an entire wide receiver unit. But if we're looking at Romeo Doubs versus Allen Lazard, I know Allen Lazard is probably the right answer, but I think Romeo Doubs, I think this is the week that Romeo Doubs takes over Allen Lazard as the wide receiver one. We saw Aaron Rodgers making high trust passes to the rookie, and the rookie came through, the rookie being Romeo Doubs. So I know it's maybe it's too early to have Doubs overtaking Allen Lazard, but I think this is the week it happens, and we're going to rank him like that. So I would be fine starting Romeo Doubs in your lineup, and I think he finds a lot of success this week, even against a tough matchup. After Romeo Doubs and Allen Lazard, we have Gabe Davis. He's going to play. I also got a notification right before this shooting that He practiced in full for the second straight day, so it's looking like we're going to have him back this week. The problem with Gabe Davis is, first of all, it's the game script. The game script against Pittsburgh, I don't think there's a whole lot of passing plays, even for a passing-first offense. But the other thing that's concerning is his target percentage. He is running more routes than Stefan Biggs on a weekly basis in this offense. And his targets are not reflecting the amount of routes he's running. So that's very concerning. It's looking like he's not getting separation, or Josh Allen's just really not looking for him. And other than the first passing touchdown of the entire season that he had in week 1, he really hasn't done anything regarding volume or production or anything. So for me, I'm not starting Gabe Davis. I am a Gabe Davis owner. I'd much rather start Josh Reynolds off the waivers than Gabe Davis. I don't think it's a reliable pick. I think you have a spike week potential with Gabe Davis. Like, he's always going to be that player that can give you a 30-point game randomly, but you don't know what week that's going to come. And every other week is going to give you those those single-digit performances. So I have to have Gabe Davis here for the upside, but I'm not confident playing him, and I would really prefer not to if you don't have to. But anyways, we have him at 30 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right after Gabe Davis, we're going to have Rashad Bateman versus Cincinnati. Now, I spoke earlier about the matchup and the shootout that I think this game is going to be. But I also think that the Cincinnati Bengals have a very good safety core, and I think that Rashad Bateman's big plays are what makes his huge fantasy productive weeks. So if the safeties are going to take the top off of this offense and not allow Rashad Bateman to get behind them, I think he's going to have more of a dink and dunk type of performance. And usually when the game script is kind of going that way, the Ravens turn to Mark Andrews and they turn to J.K. Dobbins, and they turn to Lamar Jackson on the ground. So I think Rashad Bateman has, again, a very high ceiling, but he's not one of those receivers that's getting tons of volume on a weekly basis. We're looking for those big plays here. So Rashad Bateman, 31 versus Cincinnati Bengals. After Rashad Bateman, we have Adam Thielen, the red zone beast in Minnesota. He's really, we're banking on a touchdown for him, but he's going up against the Chicago Bears, which is a pretty difficult matchup. They're the second best defense going up against fantasy wide receivers, only allowing 23.8 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver core as a whole. So it's difficult, and I think that the game script could get out of hand to where they don't, maybe it's a Dalvin Cook game for the Bengals, for the Minnesota Vikings. However, Adam Thielen always has that opportunity to get in the end zone and produce for you at a fantasy level. So Adam Thielen, 32. Right behind him, we have Devonte Smith at Arizona. I think, again, this is going to be a great matchup. It's going to be a shootout. And we've seen Devonte Smith absolutely pop off. You got to remember, he was a Heisman winner. We saw the talent a few weeks ago, and this is going to be a very good offense. So with Jalen Hurts at quarterback, Devonte Smith always has an opportunity to perform. Right behind Devonte Smith, we have Garrett Wilson versus Miami. This is... Let's see where this matchup falls. This falls in the bottom 10. So Miami Dolphins have been let in. Okay, so just for reference, I'm throwing these numbers at you, but Chicago Bears have been let up 23.8 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. We just said that. 23.8. Miami Dolphins are allowing 40. So you can see the delta right there. The difference between those two numbers are pretty substantial. And Garrett Wilson has been, he has been that X factor for that offense, combined with Breece Hall. So look for Garrett Wilson to get targeted here. Look for him to get in the end zone and give you a wide receiver 3 performance. And that's why we have him ranked at 34. 35 and 36 are going to be George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Kind of a similar situation to our Green Bay Packer and our Seattle wide receivers. I don't really know what to do with them, and I know I have some explaining to do here with Deontay Johnson. First 3 games we saw him go out there, get hyper-targeted pretty much, and kind of underperform on the efficiency side of things. But last week was the first week we saw Kenny Pickett come in at halftime, and it's the Kenny Pickett show now. And this is a little bit concerning because I think that Pickett and Pickens probably have a better connection because they were running in if you think about practice, you have your first stringers, your second, and your third. And I think at least for a majority of the offseason, Pickens and Pickett probably had more reps than Deontay Johnson and Pickett did. And I think that after the catch that Pickens made on the primetime game, it was kind of his coming out party. Last week, we saw him capitalize on that coming out party. Even with Trubisky still in the game, there was only 200-plus yards as an entirety of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense throughout the entire game against the Jets last week. And Pickens had exactly half of those yards. He accounted for half of the receiving yards of the entire game. And Deontay Johnson didn't do much. Usually you throw that one outlier week out, but I don't know if this is an outlier week. This might be what we're seeing moving forward. Pickens was an amazing prospect going into the draft, and the only reason he got drafted as late as he did was concerns for off-field issues. We've seen him get in college fights and so on and so forth and get into trouble. But I think Pickens is coming. He's coming, and I think that that's something you want to look for. If he's on your waivers, pick him up. And I'm looking at him as potentially being that Amon-Ra St. Brown breakout at the second half of the season. So I know Deontay Johnson probably should be ranked higher than this, but I'm a big George Pickens fan. Like I said, I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan, and I know that the Steelers can draft wide receivers. I've seen it for my entire life. They just draft stud after stud after stud, and I think George Pickens is one of those studs. So I think he starts to capitalize on that in week 5. He may overtake Deontay Johnson as that wide receiver 1 option. So Deontay Johnson is trending down fast for me, and George Pickens is, we could see him if he goes out there and has another 100-yard game. We could see him in the wide receiver 2 discussion next week. So that all being said, I know there's some hot takes in here, but that's what you guys come here for. These are truly how I feel about these positions. So I will give you one more thing to look at before we get out of here. This is going to be, I love this website, by the way. This is, obviously not sponsored or anything like that. But if you go to lineups.com, you can do fantasy points allowed to certain positions, which is what we use as a tool to give these rankings, comparing to their talent and opportunities. So I'm going to scroll through here quickly so you guys can pause the video and get an idea of, I know I throw these numbers out at you pretty quickly and they're hard to visualize. So I'll give you the visual here on screen so you don't have to look it up yourself. But that's going to do it for this video. Again, we're going to do the running back and wide receiver ranking videos on Tuesday, Wednesday, and or Thursday moving forward for the rest of the season. So go ahead and subscribe to the video or subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you did like the video and found any benefit from it, or if you just want to come hang out in the live streams on Sunday morning, go ahead and hit that notification bell. But thank you guys all again. Make sure you're tuning in for the Denver Broncos Indianapolis Colts game tonight. There's a lot of fantasy relevance on the line here. There's a lot of question marks we need answered. So make sure you tune into the game tonight. Set your lineups. And until Sunday morning, peace out.